Okay, boom! Ladies and gentlemen, boom! It's time to once again pull the pin on the purple hand grenade of justice, liberty, town and country planning. I don't know, the exuberance of youth, perhaps. Who the fuck knows? I want to make a video response back on Planet Reality to Friended, and I haven't got much time to make it, hence the cycling garb. I've just got home from work. And it's a comment in relation to that a hangout that he'd had with Annika Brien and ShannonQ I think about a month ago now, which I'd listened when I was cycling to work. I listened to it on the way home from work. I thought, yeah, I just want to make a bit of a response to this. Tell you why. When I had a hangout with Friended on the subject of anti-theism, he had big problems with me. With what he said I was showing correlation and not causation. I'm claiming causation, but all I'm showing is correlation, and that's unscientific. I think so entrenched was Friended, and so many times did he make this case, I kind of get the feeling that he doesn't regard abductive reasoning as science at all. Right, that would be his position. Abductive reasoning is just not science. Even so far as we got onto the subject of abortion. And of course, abortion is a situation where in the United Kingdom it's particularly pertinent. Abortion is legal in England, which has lower levels of religiosity, particularly lower levels of Catholicism. The Catholic Church has a particular stance on it. In Northern Ireland, which has much higher levels of Catholicism and levels of religiosity generally, abortion is still illegal, and it's mainly the Catholics that are against it. But Friended said, no, all you're showing with this is correlation, you're not showing causation. Just because these people are religious and religion has these doctrines, and these people also happen to hold these views on abortion, it doesn't mean that it's the religion that's informing their viewpoint. This could be something else. What else? Well, he cleared that up at one point, and what he said was, well, what it is it's that, first thing he said is that people just gravitate towards a religion that fits in with their viewpoint. So you have like a shopping list, and you're like, well, I don't think abortion is very good, so, well, I'll become a Catholic. But of course we know that most Muslims are Muslims because their parents were Muslims, Catholics are Catholics because their parents are Catholics, etc., etc., right? I don't need to explain that any further to you, but what he said was, well, maybe these things are heritable. Right, we inherit these sort of moral and ethical positions from our parents, you see. So our parents are Catholics, we get their Catholicism socially, but we're also inheriting their views. So there must be some kind of genetic difference in Northern Ireland between Catholics and Protestants, presumably. And over the last 100 years in the United Kingdom, we've evolved genetically to take a different view on abortion or something, at the same time as we've lost our religiosity, and presumably Catholics in the United Kingdom generally that have undergone a sea change in viewpoint with regard to gay marriage over the last 3 years. Maybe their genetics have altered over the last 3 years. I don't know. It all sounds like shite. I'm probably terribly strawmanning him. It's hard not to when somebody makes an argument that sounds so fucking off the scale of what seems to be obviously true. Right. Some things just seem to be true on their face. And when somebody says, well, no, it's obviously all you're showing is correlation, it's hard to know exactly how to set your teeth into that at first. But here, now I know how to set my teeth into, because I listened to this hangout. And what I heard, a central theme of Friended's was that his view, they kept saying to him, so what's the main thing at play here? What's the main thing at play with regard to religiosity? And what influences religiosity? What's the key factor here? And what he kept saying was it's existential security. That societies with high levels of existential security, this was Friended's hypothesis. Societies with high levels of existential security can drop their religion and have low levels of religiosity. Societies with low levels of existential security, they need religion. Okay, so it's not just a correlation. He's claiming causation, that it's the existential security that causes a fall in religiosity. What I want to know is where he gets that from, because he can show me correlation. I can see that correlation, but that's not good enough for him. Abductive reasoning's not good enough for him. So it just seems to me that he's doing the same thing that he isn't happy for anybody else to do, and he doesn't seem to be able to see it. He can see the speck in my eye. He can't see the log in his own there. But I want to take it a stage further than that. Let's take on board what he says. I'm prepared to do that because it makes some sense for me. I'm not really averse to this idea that a greater level of existential security enables a society to become less religious. I'm quite sure if you live in a third world society where you're living from hand to mouth on a day-to-day basis trying to stay alive, that maybe there are reasons why you would cling to religion which are, and be resistant both as an individual and as a society towards irreligiosity and not believing in a God that don't apply to modern Western societies. But he went quite a lot further than that. And one of the things that he said, he majored on healthcare, free healthcare that's free at the point of delivery. It was mentioned, the National Health Service, the NHS, specifically was mentioned several times in that Hangout. The NHS, of course, the UK, our system of healthcare that is free at the point of delivery. Not free. Free at the point of delivery. Well, that makes a big difference to some people, actually, interestingly. Old people especially. There was some data not that long ago that showed that the average person, might got the number slightly wrong, but the average person 70 or over was costing the NHS about £8,000 or £9,000 a year. The average person in their 20s, early 20s, is costing them less than £1,000 a year. So really, the group that it's made the biggest difference in terms of existential security by almost an order of magnitude are the elderly. And yet, interestingly, it is the elderly that are the most religious in the United Kingdom. The group that has had the greatest increase in existential security due to the NHS is the group that is the most religious. Now, I don't think that's a defeater. It's not a killer argument for what he says, but it's something that you've seriously got to factor in there. It shows that there are other factors at play. It certainly isn't explained by what I would suggest is the slightly simplistic model that Friended's got going on in his head there. But there's another factor there that I thought was really interesting, and Friended might not be aware of this, but This healthcare that's free at the point of delivery in the NHS is free at the point of delivery for everybody, Friended. It's not just for Protestants and atheists and Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs and Jews. It's also for Catholics. I didn't know if you was aware of that the NHS is available for Catholics in exactly the same way that it's available for Protestants, for Anglicans. I didn't know if you was aware of that. The reason that I say I didn't know that you was aware of that is that therefore since the war and soon after the war when the NHS was started, the change in existential security as a result of that has increased for Catholics in the same way as it's increased for Anglicans. And yet if you look at the data, if you look at the demographic change that's taken place, it's almost all Anglicans. It is Anglicans that are losing their religion. It isn't Catholics. Catholics have stayed remarkably stable. In fact, Catholicism has slightly increased. The increase is due to immigration. But Catholicism has been a lot more resistant to the creep of irreligiosity than Anglicanism. It's almost entirely the change in the United Kingdom, by the way, has been Anglicans losing their religion. But let's get one thing clear as well. It's not Anglicans as they're getting older or throughout their life losing their religion. It's nothing to do with that. This is to do with babies. It's to do with toddlers. It's to do with little people running around. It's to do with teenagers. It's to do with 20-somethings. We have the data comparing Anglicans and Catholics. Now, if what you're saying is true, Friended, then it seems to me what we would be seeing right, is that Catholics would be affected in the same way because they've both had the same uplift in existential security. I propose to you something different, right? This is my hypothesis, that existential security plays a part. But the biggest factor that's involved is parenting, and the way that parents bring their children up, and the expectations and the requirements with regard to religion. I propose to you that in Western societies, religion takes quite a lot of nurturing. It takes quite a lot of, I'm going to use the word, right, and I'll justify it, quite a lot of indoctrination by parents to keep a grasp of it. And this is where Anglicans have dropped the ball somewhat. They haven't done that. They've allowed their children to have a free choice. They've allowed their children to go and explore the options. They've allowed their children to make a decision based upon the facts, and overwhelmingly Anglican children have done that. And because they've not had the hard sell, they've looked at the facts and they've gone, no, we reject this, actually. The evidence doesn't point. It's not strong enough. It's piss weak, quite honestly. And I can liken it in some ways to belief in Santa. I know that appalls some Christians that somebody's likening it to belief in Santa, but bear with me. Santa is one of these things. I'll freely admit, I've told my little 3-year-old that Santa exists, and he fucking believes me. I've lied to him. Little white lie. It's an enjoyable lie, it's a fun lie, but I've lied to him. And the poor little naive fucker that he is, he's suckered for it. Hook, line and sinker. I've told him that Santa exists, right? However audacious the whole fucking thing is. The idea that he's delivering presents to every household in the world on one evening. The fact that parents obviously give the children the presents, and yet somehow Santa's giving the children the presents as well, right? Despite all these obvious flaws, he's fallen for it, hook, line and sinker. He believes that Santa exists, distributes all these presents to every single fucking child on Christmas Eve. So that is how strongly children can believe something if you push it. Right, the point is, to get back to the point, you can convince kids of this stuff. And that is what religion relies upon. It relies upon parents saying to their children, God exists. God does exist. We're telling you God exists. Santa exists. He's a real thing. Santa delivers you fucking presents on Christmas Eve. It's true. He exists. God exists, right? It doesn't rely on parents. If a parent goes to a child and says, this is the evidence for Santa, right? This is the claims for Santa. This is the evidence for Santa. This is the evidence. These are the arguments against. These are the problems. And this is the evidence against Santa. I can tell you, if I went to my 3-year-old and did that, he would reject the idea of Santa, right? He'd fucking reject it out of hand. Same thing with God is what has happened amongst Anglicans. Anglicans have gone to their kids and said, well, you decide for yourself. Have a look at the evidence. This is, we kind of believe in God, but this is the evidence and this is what other people say. And go out there and read about it. And overwhelmingly what has happened is that they've rejected it. They've looked at it and they've gone, it just doesn't fucking stack up. It doesn't add up much more than it adds up for fucking Santa. So just as we're rejecting Santa, as we get to learn about it, we're going to reject this as well. Catholics haven't done that. Muslims haven't done that. Right, this is the difference, I think. Existential security plays a part, but the biggest difference in different Western societies, I think, in different religious traditions within those Western societies, is the actions of parents. Okay, that's it. Little bit rambling. Hope you got something out of it. Thanks for listening, etc.